blood, vengeance, murder, and cannibalism. Those are probably not the words that come to mind when you think of Cinderella. The fairy tale about a poor girl who, with the aid of her fairy godmother, goes to a ball, meets her Prince Charming, and lives happily ever after, is a classic known and loved throughout the world. The phrase Cinderella story has also been adopted to refer to any underdog who overcomes incredible odds to succeed. But, like many classic fairy tales, it has a long history and, in many of its versions, enough violence to make even a wicked stepmother squirm. If you're like me, you probably saw the Disney cartoon as a kid and never had any idea of the story's long and sometimes brutal history. I don't want to be labeled as a childhood ruiner, but if the shoe fits, well... Anyway, let's take a look now at the varied and sometimes disturbing history of Cinderella. A high-born man falling in love with a beautiful low-born woman, or even slave, and having her rise to a position of power in his household, perhaps even becoming his wife, or at least a favorite companion, was not that uncommon in antiquity and later. It's likely that stories about such affairs circulated freely in ancient times, some of them true and some of them not. But what separates the Cinderella narrative from a basic love story? How did the unique elements of Cinderella come into being? One answer might lie in the story of Rhodopis, a Greek slave turned courtesan to an Egyptian pharaoh, who was held in such high regard that one myth attributed the building of a pyramid to her. She lived in the 500s BC, well after the pyramids were constructed, but it wasn't until the Greek geographer Strabo wrote about her half a millennium later that this interesting detail was added to her life story. They tell the fabulous story that, when she was bathing, an eagle snatched one of her sandals from her maid and carried it to Memphis. And while the king was administering justice in the open air, the eagle, when it arrived above his head, flung the sandal into his lap, and the king, stirred both by the beautiful shape of the sandal and by the strangeness of the occurrence, sent men in all directions into the country in quest of the woman who wore the sandal, and when she was found in the city of Naucratis, she was brought up to Memphis and became the wife of the king. So the notion of a ruler being fascinated by a strange shoe and seeking out the maiden who wore it to become his bride is at least 2,000 years old. Another Greek harem girl named Aspasia was taken to the court of Persian King Cyrus the Younger in the 5th century BC. Renowned for her intelligence and honesty, she became the king's trusted advisor until his death. 600 years later, Roman author Claudius Aelianus wrote about Aspasia in his Varia Historia, or Various History. This Aspasia is a poor girl with a facial blemish who has prophetic dreams of marrying a well-favored gentleman, as well as instructions on how to cure her ugliness. She again is taken by Cyrus and the two fall in love. Aelianus adds supernatural elements to the story of Aspasia, including magic that makes the girl more beautiful. She also outperforms three of Cyrus's more immodest courtesans, who could be said to resemble evil stepsisters at the prince's ball. Between all that and Rhodopis' shoe, we have the seeds of the later Cinderella myths. A little slavery or concubinage aside, both of these stories are generally pleasant and have happy endings for all involved. That wouldn't be the case with every Cinderella story, though. The version of Cinderella that most people are familiar with was written in 1697 by French author Charles Perrault. An earlier version, written in 1634 by Giambattista Basile, featured a fairy, magic carriage, misplaced shoe at a ball, and wicked stepsisters, 6 of them to be exact, but it's Perrault's version that the Disney movie is explicitly based upon. In this story, Cinderella has the prototypical wicked stepmother and 2 stepsisters, and is made to sit down among cinders and ashes when she finishes her menial chores, which is the source of her name, translated sometimes as the very un-Disney-like Cinder Slut. The rest of the story follows the traditional plot: the prince's ball, a fairy godmother who casts a spell that expires at midnight, the dropping of a slipper made of glass, and the prince's search for the mysterious girl whose foot fits the slipper. Once elevated to her new station, Cinderella bears her stepsisters no ill will, something you'll soon see is a rarity in these stories, matching them to 2 great lords of the court, who I'm sure were delighted with the brides the new princess found for them. A few centuries later, brothers Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm laid out another version of Cinderella that was, well, much more grim. This girl's name was Ashputel, with the ash part of her name substituting for cinder. She grows a tree on her mother's grave, which draws magical birds that help her with her chores, and somehow also pull a dress out of the tree for her to wear to the ball. She twice evades the prince and runs home, but on the 3rd night leaves a golden slipper behind. Each of the stepsisters make it fit by mutilating their feet. And the none-too-bright prince only notices the blood when one of the birds points it out to him. Finally, the prince finds his true love when Ashpatel tries on the slipper. Let's hope that he washed it first. After that, they all lived happily ever after. Unless you include the coda the brothers appended to the story a few years later, which tells what happened to the two stepsisters at the wedding of Ashpatel and the prince. When the betrothed couple went to church, the elder was at the right side and the younger at the left, and the pigeons pecked out one eye of each of them. Afterwards, as they came back, the elder was at the left and the younger at the right, and then the pigeons pecked out the other eye of each. And thus, for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness as long as they lived. They may not have been the best people, but you have to admire those two for toughing it out and staying at the wedding after having one eye each pecked out. But the Brothers Grimm have nothing on the versions of Cinderella that originate from the other side of the world. East Asia also has its own Cinderella stories, and they're far more gruesome than their European variants. The tale of Ye Shen comes from 9th century China, and can be considered to be the oldest such story to see a printed version. The title character receives help from a kindly male spirit, a fairy godfather, I guess, and the bones of her fish friend, who is killed by her evil stepmother, who has just one daughter of her own. When the spring festival arrives, Ye Shen's magical dead fish friend provides her with a splendid dress and slippers, woven of golden threads, in a pattern like the scales of a fish, and the glistening soles were made of solid gold. Fearing that her family will recognize her, she runs away from the festival, losing one of her slippers. The slipper finds its way to the king of Tohan, who is determined to find its owner. That happens, of course, and the king marries Ye Shen. And then the story concludes like this. But fate was not so gentle with her stepmother and stepsister. Since they had been unkind to his beloved, the king would not permit Ye Shen to bring them to his palace. They remained in their cave home, where one day it is said they were crushed to death in a shower of flying stones. But perhaps the most brutal Cinderella story is the Vietnamese tale of Tom and Cam. Tom is the heroine and Cam is her stepsister. The story is almost identical to that of Ye Shen, with a magical dead fish, Tom running from the festival and losing a slipper, the king finding it and marrying her. But this tale continues on for a while after the wedding. Tom returns home on her father's anniversary and climbs a tree, only to have her stepmother cut it down and kill her. Her daughter Cam then becomes the queen, but Tom's restless spirit becomes a nightingale that the king adopts. Cam kills that, and Tom becomes a tree. She bears a fruit that an old woman takes, revealing her true form, and when the king visits the old woman, he finds Tom and they reunite. Given everything she's been through, however, it comes as no surprise that Tom decides to deal with her treacherous family once and for all. Her stepsister Cam asks her how she can become as beautiful as her, and Tom suggests she jump into a hole and have boiling water poured on her. Not being blessed with either beauty or intelligence, it seems, Cam does just that and dies instantly. Tom then turns Cam's body into a jar of sauce that she sends to her stepmother as a gift. When she gets to the bottom of the jar, she sees her daughter's skull and dies instantly. A Korean tale, the story of stepsisters Kanjui and Padjui, is similar, including the reincarnations in the sauce, as well as tales from Cambodia, Indonesia, and Japan. It's likely that all these tales share some common ancestry. I can't wait for Disney to make movies out of them. Many other stories from all around the world utilize some elements of the Cinderella narrative, mostly centering on a young girl who's oppressed by her family, but ultimately finds love with a handsome princely figure. Once he recognizes her, that is. Even the Native American Algonquin people have a tale known as the Rough-Faced Girl. That one has a wicked family that the girl is trying to escape, and a handsome man for her to win, but there's no mention of lost slippers. In all, there are estimated to be hundreds or perhaps thousands of variants of Cinderella out there, none of which can truly be called the definitive telling of the tale. Even Aladdin or Titanic could nominally be considered Cinderella stories, but with a kind-hearted low-born boy finding love with a girl far above his station, each with their own special object to take the place of a shoe. While it's not too unusual to see such couples form today, not that long ago it would have been virtually unthinkable for a king or other great man to marry a commoner, no matter how beautiful or charming she might be. The trope of escaping a dreary existence and finding a happy ending is universal, and so it's no surprise that far-flung areas of the world that had virtually no contact with each other, like ancient Europe, first millennium Asia, and pre-Columbian America, would have spawned similar tales. The ball or festival, and lost slipper that goes with it, would have been simple enough details to add to help make the heroine stand out and give the story drama as the prince seeks her out, with only a shoe to go by. Even with today's lowered barriers between classes, the story endures in all its various forms. It might have some slight factual basis in the stories of Rhodopis and Aspasia, and others whose names are forgotten to history, but it doesn't need that to show a bright future that anyone can dream of. Ideally without all the murder. Thank you so much for watching this video about the historical and literary origins of Cinderella. I thought I'd do something a little different and tackle a fairy tale this time around, so let me know if this is the sort of thing you'd like me to do more videos about. In the meantime, beware of vengeful step-siblings offering you gifts of homemade sauce.